In terms of pesto, it's about using your five senses as well, in terms of adding a lot of flavour, a lot of texture as well, because you can really play around with it in terms of when you're adding the nuts or when you're adding pasta. So we're going to go ahead with it, and I'll tell you a little bit more about why I love this and why I chose to do it today, because it relates to a little bit more about what I do and what my speciality is. But if you are cooking along, we're going to need a handful of fresh basil. And we're just gonna, it's just a very simple recipe, and you're just gonna put it in, whip it up in a blender, so it will be a little bit noisy at some point, but we'll get some basil. Have you made pesto before, Evelyn? Okay. Yeah, it's one for everyone, for sure, definitely. So yeah, so you can use any sort of herb you wanted. I prefer using fresh herbs because obviously of the pungency of the fresh herbs, and really trying to get your little one to be adventurous with fresh herbs and herbs in general. So after you've chosen your herb, we've chosen basil today, but you could go for parsley, you could go for coriander, dill. Dill is really nice as well. You could paste that over some fish, so that's really good. Right, so let's add in the spinach. And then we are going to put in about maybe 2 tablespoons of grated parmesan. So I like to grate the parmesan just because if you've made pesto before, you'll see that sometimes if you put a big blob of parmesan, sometimes it doesn't whiz. So I like to put grated parmesan because it's just easier, and I know it's definitely going to get into my pesto. Right, so that's about 2 tablespoons, so we'll pop that in there as well. And I've already pre-measured, but it's about 120 ml of olive oil. You can use another oil if you like. I wouldn't recommend a vegetable oil or anything like that. Olive oil gives it a really nice sort of earthy taste, so that's brilliant. And obviously if you're cooking with the pesto, you don't need to add any extra oil onto your dish, so that's really good. So yeah, we've got this in here. And then 1 garlic clove. Now if I was probably making this, I'd probably put about 2 or 3, but obviously we have to remember we've got to remember that it's a little taste buds, and a little goes a long way, but we tend to forget that, I think, when we're cooking. But yeah, so I've just added 1 garlic clove, and then a squeeze of lemon juice. So a squeeze of lemon juice is really important because it really cuts through all the flavors. So if the basil is really pungent, for example, then this will really just create more layers in the pesto. So just a generous squeeze of lemon juice, and you'll be surprised actually. I mean, it looks like a lot, but you'll be surprised how well your baby can take to it. Like my little one, the other day I was in the kitchen and he was literally squeezing this lemon juice through his mouth, but maybe that's because during pregnancy I ate quite a lot of sour things. And they do say, on that note actually, they do say that your baby's already exposed to herbs and spices anyway, because if you actually ate it during pregnancy and obviously breastfeeding, it's transferred during the amniotic fluid and also breast milk. So yeah, don't be afraid to use herbs and spices. Right, and then the last one for this one is your choice of nuts. So you can use any nut you would like. I'm actually going to use cashew nuts today. The only reason I like to use cashew nuts is because it really offers really nice creaminess and a really lovely texture at the end of it. So I'm going to just pop that in there. Why I like pesto is because you can actually introduce allergens. So as you all know, nuts is an allergen, but we've been doing pesto with walnuts, pistachios, almonds. Oh gosh, you can introduce seeds as well, so sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, anything really. So that's why pesto is just such a brilliant thing. And in terms, I know I added spinach, but actually in terms of the kind of vegetable or something that you're using, because you really want to add enough, like a lot of nutrients and stuff in it. The spinach is full of iron, which is quite hard actually. I think especially for vegetarians, babies who are on plant-based diets, they don't eat enough meat, or they don't eat meat at all. So of course adding spinach to something like this, broccoli, anything that's green, so kale, broccoli, you can add avocado to add more texture. You can add like roasted beetroot as well, which is brilliant. So yeah, you can do so much with pesto. But if you've got any like remaining roasted veg, then yeah, just whiz it, pop it in a blender, use the same sort of recipe, very similar sort of pesto recipe, and whiz it. So without further ado, we are just going to whiz it. You might need a little bit more olive oil depending on how much, or what vegetable you're using, what nut you're using, and of course what herb you're using. So it's going to be a little bit noisy, guys, but bear with me. wonderful. So I've actually used a NutriBullet today because I find NutriBullet is just so brilliant it's just so quick, so clever. I mean, we've been using it for ages since we started with smoothies and since it came out really, but I didn't really need to buy anything special for when Avir started weaning, just because I know there's a lot of stuff out there, but you know, there's stuff in your kitchen that you could use. So food processor and NutriBullet will just do the job absolutely fine. So I don't know if you guys can see that, but we've got a lovely green, yeah, so it's really good. So with this actually, what you can do is you can whiz it as little or as much as you like. But obviously once you've whizzed it, but I like it because you can add more texture in terms of, you know, whizzing it for less amount of time so it's thicker, so your baby can actually taste the, you know, the little bits of lumps of nuts. If you're using broccoli, for example, broccoli's got a brilliant texture in terms of the surface, so you know, she or he can really taste that. So yeah, so really play around with it because I think it's important, and this is what makes your baby an adventurous eater, and you know, they will accept foods a lot more if you're playing with herbs and spices and if you're playing with vegetables, you know. Okay, yeah, so my favourites at the minute is I love pistachio and almond. I think they work really well. Pistachio is really earthy, quite green tones, and almond is just so woody and it's absolutely lovely. So I would definitely use almond and pistachio. And actually a herb that works really well with that is dill. It's just absolutely gorgeous. So yeah, dill, I think people struggle with dill actually because they don't really know what to do with it. I know we relate it to fish, but what if somebody's not eating fish? You can always just roast some butternut squash, pop it up, you know, roast it quite soft, obviously, so that a baby can eat it well. It depends if you're spoon-fed, you know, baby weaning, or if you're baby-led. It doesn't really matter, but you can sort of, yeah, you can just be flexible how you want to do it. But yeah, pop this over with a bit of feta cheese. You know, really just play with it, but it doesn't have to be in a pasta. And I think that's probably the misconception as well. It doesn't have to be in a pasta. It can be over fish. It can be over, I don't know, grilled chicken, you know, stir it in some rice. You know, if your baby's not had rice before and they really like pesto, try and think of something that is familiar to them in order to try and get them to taste new flavours. So if they've never had pasta and if they've never had pesto, I probably wouldn't put the two together. Just because it's really overwhelming it's just overwhelming for them in general. Even if you're going towards them with a spoon or if you're presenting them with anything, it's super overwhelming. I mean, if you think about it, I mean, what do you like? What do you not like actually in terms of food? Do you have any preferences or dislikes? Okay, it's texture. That is such a common texture problem. But for example, if I gave you mushrooms and you didn't like them, and I knew you didn't like them, I wouldn't keep force feeding you these mushrooms. And I think obviously there's a lot of research out there that it says that it takes up to, I don't know, 15 exposures for a baby to actually accept a flavour or a texture. But in my opinion, so I've done it with you know, friends, I've done it with my sister's kids, I've done it with my own, like now. It's really overwhelming. I mean, think about it for yourself. Like, you can't just keep giving them mushrooms, you know, think about how you're going to give them the mushrooms. So do you maybe blitz it up first, and then do you give them the whole mushroom so they can feel it, they can smell it, they can really get all their five senses and really get engrossed in it. And then, you know, if they like sweet potato, for example, I don't know yet any kid that doesn't like sweet potato, but then do you maybe mix a little bit of mushroom puree into the sweet potato? So, because they're already familiar with the sweet potato, it'd be better to combine something that they're familiar with in combination with something that they're not so familiar with or something they don't like, and you know they don't like it. So yeah, so that's my advice in terms of how to expose newbies to, you know, flavour and texture. But just really think about it. It's so important when you're weaning to take a step back. It's overwhelming for a mother or for anybody weaning, but take a step back and put yourself in the baby's shoes. You know, they don't like it, so don't keep just force feeding it. You know, give it a break. Think about something that they like. So if your baby likes rice, for example, maybe add a bit of mushroom puree into the rice. So it's a little bit more accepting. Does that make sense? So yeah, so I'll continue with the recipe. But yeah, it's all right. So we whizzed it up, and obviously the recipe that I provided today is the pasta one. So I've got some pre-cooked pasta here. I've actually used, I'll just show you, I've used some baby pasta stars, but you can use any pasta. So depending on what stage your baby is at weaning, you can use sort of penne, you can use spaghetti, you can use fusilli, you can use all sorts of things. Actually, I was in Aldi a couple of weeks ago and I found these brilliant things, and it's penne, but it's made out of green pea flour. Then you've got some chickpea, you've got beetroot and red lentils, so you can really like play around with it. But yeah, choose any sort of thing you would like in terms of medium or what pasta, and pop it in. So you just stir it through. Probably good to have the heat up as well, so you can really break the olive oil molecules. So we'll whack that and pop that up as well. So you just stir it, give it a quick stir. And this is such a quick recipe as well. If you're really stuck for ideas and you don't know what to give baby for lunch or for dinner, you can chuck chicken in this, you can put other vegetables on top of the pesto. So it's a great way to, to get your baby to eat loads of different things. Right, so that's heating up quite nicely. I might pop a little bit more in there. There we go. Oh, it does smell gorgeous, I won't lie. I mean, everything's digital now, so you never know, it could be around the corner. Right. So my next thing is to just add a tablespoon of ricotta. So I love ricotta because it adds a little bit of sweetness and a little bit more depth to the baby pesto. But of course, in terms of like dairy and allergens, I know people are a bit more concerned, and also with pasta and wheat. So obviously just check that your baby is okay with all these allergens before you add all these things in. But baby pesto, in terms of, you don't have to put the nuts in, but yeah, in terms of everything else, it's a brilliant thing to use. So I'm just going to pop a tablespoon of ricotta in here, and I'm just going to stir it through just like so. Ricotta is brilliant as well because it's so easily, it just coats the pasta and whatever dish you're sort of making. You could use ricotta as well for, stuffing chicken breast or anything really. It's a really good thing. So I found it really helpful in terms, because obviously Avir couldn't really chew cheddar or like do anything till quite later, till about 8-9 months. But I give him grated cheddar. But I think trying to give them different cheeses and soft cheeses, it's just expanding their palate even further. So he's become so adventurous now, and it's fascinating. He wants everything we're eating, and I'm just like, this is champagne, this is beer, I'm not sure, this is okay, fine, this is coffee. And actually, I'll be honest with you guys, we have, because obviously from my background, I have actually given him like, just the coffee foam is really bitter. And I've just gone a bit like, yeah, that, and he's just perfect, he's fine, he doesn't flinch, and I'm just thinking, oh my God, this is crazy. So have fun with it, by all means, do have fun with it. Right, and the final thing that I'm going to add is ground nutmeg. So ground nutmeg is one of the warming spices. It's something that really just lifts dairy, especially, I feel, the creaminess of things. So literally just going to pop a pinch in it. A little goes a long way, especially with the ground spices, because the oils they've probably been roasted, which means that their oils have really come out and they've got a lot of aroma volatiles, and then they've been blitzed, so you can imagine they're super strong. Like, I can smell that from here. So yeah, so ground spices they can be quite strong, but of course it depends on the make and where you've got it from. We finished our baby pasta now. So I don't know if you can see it, but it's a lovely luminous green colour, but it's gorgeous. And if you gave this to a baby, they'd probably be more interested in eating it just because of the colour.